What if the most heartbreaking ending to the Amazing Digital Circus isn't a tragedy at all? We've spent 2.5 years watching Pomni, Jax, Ragatha, Kinger, Gangle, and Zooble try to survive inside a place they never asked to be in. They've been tortured, manipulated, and pushed to the edge of abstraction. An exit has always been the dream. But with the finale just weeks away, there's a theory I can't get out of my head. What if an exit finally appears in episode 9? And some of them don't take it. What if choosing to stay is the whole point? From the very first episode, Ragatha pulls Pomni aside and tells her that after enough time, you stop chasing after something that doesn't exist, or you risk losing sight of who you are, why you're even alive. And when you reach your breaking point, something really terrible happens. It's not that she's given up on the idea of leaving the circus. No. It's because she knows exactly what would happen to her if her sanity crumbles. Abstraction. And then in episode 8, Pomni eventually comes to the same realization. They're all going to abstract if they're chasing after something that doesn't exist, driving themselves crazy. But unlike Ragatha and the others, who still cling on to hope, Pomni wants them to abandon the idea of leaving entirely and says what nobody else has been willing to say out loud. I think we need to abandon the idea of leaving. She tells them their hopes were raised and crushed, and that they can't let that despair consume them. Maybe what we have to do now is to just live. This isn't a character surrendering. This is a character who has watched everything fall apart and realized the only thing still standing is the people around her. On Tumblr, Gooseworks has said that there is meaning in a stagnant life when asked about what message people should take away from the series. And I think episode 9 is going to make every single one of us feel exactly what that means. Let's start with Kinger. He's been in that circus since 1999. 26 years. He watched every single person from the original group abstract, one by one, until he was completely alone. In episode 3, in one of his rare moments of full clarity, he tells Pomni about his wife. He describes her as funny and creative, someone who was passionate about entomology, and who somehow convinced him to love bugs too, despite hating them his whole life. It's not a cheerful memory, he admits, but it's one he can hold on to. And then he says something that is easy to miss in the moment, but lands like a gut punch when you come back to it. He tells Pomni that even when everything feels pointless, it isn't. Not if you have people who care about you, that good memories matter, that you should cherish the people around you while you still can. Because in the circus, the worst thing you can do is make someone feel unwanted or unloved. In episode 8, we finally see the moment Kinger and Queenie first found each other inside the circus, both of them confused, both of them unable to remember their own names, but recognizing each other instantly. He tells her he wishes he could remember her name. She says she does too. And then he apologizes for dragging her into this with him. If a real exit door appeared, what exactly would Kinger be going back to? He has no idea what year it is outside. Everyone he ever knew has already moved on with their lives. For Kinger, the circus isn't a prison anymore. The people inside it are the only family he has left. I don't think Kinger would walk through that door. And I don't think it would feel like defeat. It would feel like a man who finally understands that home isn't a place you return to. It's the people you refuse to leave. Ragatha is the most optimistic character in the show, and that optimism has always felt a little heartbreaking because you can see how hard she works to maintain it, especially in episode 5, when she talks about her life before the circus. She talks about her mother, and the way she says it tells you everything. She's certain her mother doesn't miss her. And she's equally certain she doesn't miss the yelling, the berating, or the guilt-tripping that defined life at home. She came from a home with an abusive mother. The circus, for all its horrors, might genuinely be the first place she's ever felt like she matters. She's been there since 2008. She's built relationships. She's the one everyone leans on. Episode 8 shows us that Kane's deepest torture for Ragatha is a shadow of her mother throwing knives at her, because that shadow has always followed her. But the real world is where that shadow lives. Inside the circus, she built something different, a version of herself that chose kindness even when the world made cruelty easy. I still think Ragatha would leave the circus if given the chance, but she would make sure everyone else gets through before making her own decision. Gooseworks once said that the worst thing Jax has ever done hasn't happened yet, which, going into the final episode, is either a warning or a promise. Either way, it's fascinating. In episode 6, Jax tells Pomni exactly how he survives in the circus. He tells her that holding on to the part of yourself that still belongs to the real world gets you nothing. That Ragatha tries to be kind and friendly and gets torn apart for it every other adventure. That whether they like it or not, they're cartoon characters now, and pretending otherwise is pointless. And when Pomni pushes back, he shuts the conversation down entirely by insisting he does everything because it's funny. Because being the funny one is all he is. But in episode 7, Jax nearly abstracts. He is shown visions of Ribbit and Kaufmo surrounding him, and he reaches for them. Whatever armor he built since they were gone cracked completely. His panic attack comes not from danger, but from the sudden realization that everything in the circus is real, that all of it mattered, that he hurt real people. The real world for Jax is a place of accountability, of being 22 years old with no Ribbit and no Kaufmo and no way to explain to anyone who he became in there. The circus is the only place Jax has ever had power in, and that's why I think Jax would stay, not because he doesn't want out, but because he is terrified of what he finds out about himself when there's nothing left to hide behind. Gangle is someone who has spent her entire time in the circus hiding. Her comedy mask isn't just a metaphor, it's how she survives. But in episode 8, she is the one who cuts through all the noise and says the thing that actually matters. She tells the group that they could argue and hurt each other all day, but that won't help anyone. What they actually need to do, she says, is be there for each other. That quiet moment was the most growth we've ever seen from her. I think Gangle would leave, but she goes through the door differently than she would have in episode 1. She goes through it as herself, with a broken mask and no plans to replace it. Then there's Zooble. I think Zooble made a decision somewhere before the show even began. They chose detachment because hope was too painful. But episode 8 cracked that. Zooble is the one who sees Jax leaving and tells him directly that they're not going to let him wander off and abstract by himself. That he's a pain, but he's still one of them. That moment cost Zooble something real. They let themselves care. I think Zooble goes through the door but looks back once. And that look back is worth more than any speech any other character could give. And Pomni? She arrived wanting nothing more than to get out. She still does. But she's not the same person who stumbled onto that stage in episode 1 anymore. She figured out the bucket trick for Kinger. She stood up to Kane when everyone else was too broken to move. And when Ragatha reminds her that they are all in this together, Pomni answers that they always will be, no matter what. I think Pomni, despite no longer being desperate to find an exit, would still leave. But the final shot isn't her stepping into the light, through the door and back into the real world. It's her looking back at whoever chose to stay, and understanding, for the first time, that maybe they made the right choice too. Most finales about trapped characters end one of two ways. Everyone escapes and it's triumphant, or no one escapes and it's devastating. But this show has never been interested in either of those. Every single episode has been about what happens in the space between those extremes, in the stillness, in the ordinary moments that somehow matter more than the chaos. The friendships that formed not because the characters chose each other, but because they were stuck with each other long enough to actually see each other. An ending where some stay and some go doesn't give us a villain to blame or a hero to celebrate. It gives us something much harder and much more honest. People making the best choice they can with what they know, and having to live with it. That is the whole show in one moment. And that is exactly the kind of ending that people talk about for years. But what do I know?
Maybe everyone escapes. Maybe no one does. Maybe Jax burns the whole thing down on the way out. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Do they escape? Do they stay? And which character do you think will make the most unexpected choice? If you enjoyed this video, subscribe. See you in the next one.